My name is Billy Morris Davis. I was born January the 3rd, 1918. I grew up in a little country church near Howe, Texas, named Davis Chapel. Well, things were quite a bit different in those days. We didn't have very much convenience that we have today. We didn't have electricity in our homes. We had to carry water to drink and wash and eat, and we did a lot of walking and working and go to church on Sunday, and we had the prayer meetings on Saturday nights, and we had church at a little country church for the community out in the country. There has been a lot of changes, of course, been in the last almost 100 years that I'm getting close to being 99 years old in January the 3rd, and there was really a lot of difference. When I first started to go into school, we had to go in a horse and buggy. My sister was older than I am, and she drove the horse, and we rode in a buggy for about 3 miles to go to school for the early part of my life. Later we had a car, and she drove the car to school, and we went to school about 3 or 4 miles from where I lived, growed up. Well, we had a piano, and one of the people that lived in the community played the piano, and they sang old songs from the hymnals, and we had church on Sundays and had prayer meetings on Wednesday night, and through the summer we'd have maybe a 2-week revival at our little church, and we attended those services. We didn't have no television. We didn't have no radios, because at my place we didn't have any electricity until I was a teenager. So we played marbles, and we played the ball and stuff like that back when I was a kid.
Right.
Done a lot of work, didn't have as much time to fool around as some of these youngsters do today, maybe. The war come along in the early 40s, and I worked for Goodfellow Field in San Angelo, Texas until the war was over, and then I moved back to Sherman and worked here as a driver for a beverage truck for a number of years, and finally moved to Colorado, me and my wife, in 1949, and I lived in Colorado for 42 years before moving back to Texas in 1992. But those years that I lived in Colorado, I worked for the city of Pueblo for almost 20 years, almost 29 years, and returned back here and began to attend a church at Sherman Nazarene Church in 1992, and I've been here attending ever since. So we didn't have any television until in the early 50s. The television came into existence. We got electricity at our home back when I was a teenager, and that gave us electric lights and improved the quality of life a whole lot. And at that time we were able to use electrical appliances and stuff that the older people were not privileged to have. So my wife became ill shortly after we married in about 1941, and I was given a classification exempt from military service on account of her sickness, and I never was called up to the service, but I was reclassified to go to service just about at the end of the war, and then we never did, the war ended and never did have to go. So,
what branch were you wanting to be in the military?
well, I never really had any special desire to be in any particular branch at that time, but back when I was a kid I had one good pair of overalls and not too many other conveniences to appreciate, but I never had to go hungry, and I had enough. I belonged to a big family, and we were fortunate to have plenty of food and a place to live, and growed up on the farm, working on the farm.
Mm-hmm. You lived through many ages of discrimination towards other races. How was that tension in the air for you? How did that affect you?
Well, back in those days, early days, there was a discrimination between the colored folks and the white people. I remember here in Sherman they used to have places for the colored people to drink and the white people to drink, and they had special restrooms for the colored people, and when I moved to Colorado they were a little more advanced in their communication and everything, and they were here, but finally integration was accomplished to pretty sufficient extent. So we had the papers that we got most of the time. I think the early ages they come by mail, but they finally got paper out and out in the country and stuff like that. But we didn't have all the modern convenience that we have now. We had to wash clothes and hang them on the line to dry, and we had to carry water to drink and feed the animals. My dad was a sharecropper farmer and had 4 old mules to do the work with, and we had to do a lot of field work and picking cotton and cutting weeds and taking care of the animals.
What were major events that you remember learning about, or one that came to most of a shock to you back in that time?
One of the things I really remember is that here in Sherman, when I was a teenager, they had a riot, and they had a colored man that they were accused of some atrocities, and they had a riot and burned the courthouse down here in Sherman, Texas. And I remember coming to Sherman, and they had military people to corral, make sure that there was no other riots going on, and finally they rebuilt the courthouse here at Sherman, but at one time they did have a riot. So that was, I was a teenager at that time, so in school at Howe, Texas. So I was probably about 12 years old, 12. I was in school, but...
yeah, it was 1930s, I think I remember. It was around there.
Probably so. World War II came along about the early 1940s, and I remember that Pearl Harbor was attacked, and we didn't realize really what had happened at the time, but wound up being a very serious situation for our country. So
you also lived through the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings?
Yeah, I remember the bombs that they dropped on Japan and that ended the war. So that was, I was at about in the mid-20s maybe when that happened. So
what was your standpoint on the Holocaust and Hitler's reign? How How did
Well,
you feel about that?
That's a hard decision to say what was the right thing to do. So other people made that decision, and some think it was right and some think it was wrong. So I'll not voice an opinion on that because I don't really know what I would have done if I had been in the place of our president and the government and army officials. So.
How do you feel people have changed since your childhood to the way we are now?
People have changed quite a bit. The things that were allowed back in those days are considered now not so bad or not so important as they were at that time. So I think that people are drifting from what is right and what is holy and good in those days has become a lot less important to them in this time, and I don't see any big change in the future. So,
what time period would you go back to if you could go back to anyone?
well, I liked my early teenage and upper 20s. I had a job, I had a car, and I was pretty well provided for at that time, and enjoyed the conveniences and the blessings that were given to me at that time. And thank the Lord that He's spared my life for all of these years. So,
is there anything else you'd like to tell anyone viewing this? Any advice or anything?
I thank the Lord every day that He's blessed me with a long, good life, and I don't know exactly why He's keeping me around here, but I said He may be trying to polish me up and get me ready to take me up there, and He's having a hard time doing it, so He's still working on me.
All right. Well, I think we're done with this interview. Thanks for your time, Brother Morris, and thank you for answering these questions.